Welcome, and thank you for joining us. It's been a kind of a wild winter. We have been shut away in the office for a lot of the time, just building on kind of our plan going forward once we are out of the emergency setting for COVID. No mask mandates. What are we going to do with ourselves? I think I have a brother somewhere again, and I haven't seen him in years. So we have stuff to do. One of the things that we really like, one of the things that was evident with the pandemic is how necessary a medical reserve corps was for Lane County, and how difficult it was because we didn't have one. So that's going to be kind of the subject of this meeting, this Zoom call. But first, I want to show you guys some stats, which I shared before. Move this. No? Okay, why not? All right. We had over 200,000 vaccinations at our mobile clinics. That includes the mass clinics, mobile. We had the independent team at bus stops, just driving around, vaccinating everyone. It was incredible. So I managed to count up all of those hours, 22,450 clinic hours between volunteers and staff physically at clinics. Mobile clinics, 7,000, mass vax, 15,000. And so I got to thinking, well, what does that even mean? Because I'm having a hard time putting that in perspective. So that's just under 3,000 work days. It's 935 calendar days, 565 work weeks. If we took that time and we decided to walk somewhere, that would be about 6,400 miles, almost 3 Oregon trails, 21.7 trips across Oregon, north and south, 16.24 trips west to east, and over 3,000 hikes up Mount Hood. That is an insane accomplishment. I was grabbing all this data while we were moving through the year, but I wasn't able to really look at it and absorb what it was. I'm still having trouble with that, honestly. I knew what we were doing was really, really big, but.
And it's still going on. We still have clinics 3 to 4 times a week. So the tally keeps rising.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, everyone. I wanted that first acknowledgement of the work you guys did, the effort, the sacrifice, and show you kind of what that did. Okay, why are we doing this now? Because we are going to be out of an emergency soon. We know that, like Sarah was saying, there's still a lot of work to be done. One of the things that for me was really cool was learning how proactive public health could be, how much impact we actually could have involving community members. I realized I skipped a step. I'm sorry. I'm Evan. I've been with Lane Public Health for a year, a little bit more. You'll remember me from the emails, and I do apologize for all those. I am now the Lane County, or the Deputy Public Health Reserve Corps. No, the Public Health Reserve Corps Deputy, excuse me. I haven't said that a lot of times. And then, so Sarah, do you want to talk about how you got involved?
Sure. Hi, everybody. We had our technical difficulties did not allow us to do our proper introduction. I am the field operations supervisor for public health. And so currently I'm supervising our testing and our vaccine clinics. And I also, along with Evan, am working on the project to develop and make official a public health reserve corps. My background is I've worked for public health for the past year in our response. I was the equity officer for our emergency response, and then I've worked within the MRC and our field operations since the fall. I have a degree in public health. I also was a first responder and a volunteer firefighter, and I'm an EMT. So I come at this very much from like a public health slash emergency response perspective. And so every day right now, my job is very fun. It's basically getting to dream about what a public health reserve corps can be. And we have some really exciting things coming down the pipeline that we've been able to acquire throughout COVID. And so one of them is, for example, an RV that has been outfitted to be a community mobile clinic. So we can do preventative care, well checks. Our communicable disease nurses want to use it to do STI checks and things like that. So we're dreaming big with public health, and we're very excited about the ways that a public health reserve corps of volunteers, both clinical and non-clinical, will be able to really fill gaps and partner with public health to go out into our community and serve our community beyond the pandemic. And what we have in mind is something that isn't just emergencies and disasters, but is actually on a weekly basis and on a daily basis, identifying what our gaps are, identifying where we want to serve and how we can serve. Evan's done some really great surveying of everybody, so we're able to start getting an idea of interest areas. We know that we want to have a vibrant public health reserve corps, and we want to carry the volunteerism that has been so amazing throughout the pandemic and turn this into something ongoing. So thank you all for being here.
All right. So again, why are we doing this now? What we're doing is responding to the great need that we saw during the pandemic for a comprehensive medical reserve corps on the county level. These are some more numbers. These are the 2020 Medical Reserve Corps numbers for Oregon. 15 MRC units total, 1,725 volunteers, 5,625 volunteer hours, and 230 activities for all of Oregon for all of 2020. The community immunity corps, you can see, in 2021, blew that out of the water. 800 volunteers, 22,450 hours, 499 activities. That is, that's as great a demonstration of need as I think I could come up with. But it also shows potential. It shows what we can do, and it shows that we're good at what we can do. I think with Sarah's plan for a public health corps, I think we can keep this going. I think we can do a lot of good in the community. So some of our difficulties that we had, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Health and Human Services volunteer onboarding process that we were using in the beginning of the pandemic, the vaccine response. Took about 45 days sometimes. A lot of paperwork, a lot of stress, a lot of grief on both ends. One of the things that some of you may know, some of you may not, is that every volunteer that we brought on board with Serve Oregon, so these were all of our medical volunteers for the most part, we were kind of doing that on hard mode. Our regional coordinator with Serve Or had to gather individual volunteers from Wayne County who registered on the platform She had to find all of you guys, put you on a list, make sure all of your paperwork was good and ready and you were credentialed, pass all your checks, and then she sent those to us. And we had to then cross-check that against a couple different Excel spreadsheets, make sure everyone was current. No one else had to do that because they had a medical reserve corps. And what that allows us to do is have a ready group of people who are pre-credentialed, paperwork's already done, pre-coordinated, way easier. Response time and coordination. We did a lot of learning over that year, especially in the spring. With an active medical reserve corps or a public health reserve corps, that's already built in. The goal is to be ready to respond, to be trained, to have plans in place. We also had a lack of established relationships. We had to go out and meet people, meet organizations, go into communities, talk to people on the ground. That took up a lot of time and it delayed our response incredibly. So there's got to be a better way. This is the flip side of that. Rapid response, established communication channels, liability protections for volunteers, standardization of systems. The Public Health Reserve Corps follows a nationwide model called the ICS, Incident Command System. And that goes from the hyper-local regional responses all the way up to the national level. We get county leadership buy-in, planning, excitement, endorsement, resources, funding, coordination with a local network of organizations and expertise. We have a good amount of community organizations across Lane County that know their community very well, and they've been operating for a few years. We don't want to invade someone else's territory if they're doing a good job, or maybe we're supporting them with what they do. We know a lot of our volunteers are part of multiple different organizations and groups. We don't want to triple dip our volunteers, so one volunteer is listed 3 times on people's records. And then of course, a core of skilled, trained, caring community members. That's the key, that's our foundation. Because of you guys, that's how we were able to get all those amazing numbers from last year. So Sarah came to me, I think it was October or November, and she said, I want to do this and I want to do it differently. And Sarah, do you want to talk about what your dream is?
Yeah, and it's not just my dream. It's a lot of people in public health have been thinking about this for a long time. So what we know is that the traditional model of a medical reserve corps came out right after 9/11, and it was kind of using a militarized model to organize medical volunteers, so that when you have a large scale emergency or disaster, you can respond. And so, 20 years later, there are some really neat models that are being utilized across the country. They still use kind of the acronym MRC, but for Lane County, we're really wanting to do a public health reserve corps. We want medical and non-medical volunteers. We want people with all kinds of skill sets. And we want to be ready we want to train, have the equipment, have leadership teams among volunteers to be able to respond to earthquakes, floods, fires, as well as have teams that can go and provide weekly first aid in our encampments around the community, that can go and support Egan warming centers, that can do first aid for community-based organizations who are holding their own events. There's a lot of possibility for what it is that we can do. If you at any point want to do a little search on they're called mission sets for MRCs. There's some really neat stuff. There is, you can train on psychological first aid. So we can have a team of people who have had either crisis care training or our mental health providers, therapists, social workers, counselors, who train and prepare for whatever emergency is happening in our community and responding and providing psychological and mental health support. For example, we currently have there have been a higher than usual number of suicides across Lane County recently. And so something that a public health reserve corps could do is have a group of trained mental health professionals that can support other local entities, whether it's within schools or if it's in a community that doesn't have as many resources, such as, a coastal town or a rural town. So there's a lot of potential and a lot of possibility for volunteer leadership, for really fun trainings and exercises, and also for kind of building a vision in a variety of ways so that we can really be ready from large scale to small scale events. So that's really what our vision is in terms of, we want a public health reserve corps that is filling public health gaps on a daily and weekly basis, and not just ready to deploy for large scale emergencies, but also ready to do that.
This is more about what Sarah said. Inclusive, we want to bring community members into the core. If we're helping a community, we want them involved, active, and to a good degree, coordinating and leading our efforts, informing our efforts. We want this to be.
And we want.
Go ahead.
Sorry. We want to do a lot of good outreach. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is having, how do we build a volunteer set that is representative of our community? So we know that a lot of volunteers are often older retirees, right? And it's important to have that. That's a foundational core, because those are people who have time and skill sets that we need. But additionally, how do we do outreach into other communities, into schools, into perhaps, I come from, as I said, I come from emergency medical services. So going to EMT schools locally at Lane Community College, looking at different health professions, recruiting community members of color, right? So making sure that we don't have a crew of only white volunteers. We want volunteers who are bilingual and bicultural and are culturally aware, have lots of training on trauma-informed care, and culturally representative of all communities across our county, including communities of color, which often face more health disparities than other communities because of the barriers that they face, whether it's language, socioeconomic status, access to healthcare, all of those things. So we really, another vision that we have is having some really active outreach efforts so that we can build a core that is encompasses skill sets, ages, demographics that represent our community. One of our, I was talking with our emergency preparedness coordinator, kind of building a sample budget, and she had a great idea. She said, if you're doing trainings and exercises, you should have childcare available so that people who want to train on weekends but have kids can bring their kids and have snacks. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. So that's just some of the fun stuff that we're kind of thinking about right now.
This goes to the representative nature of the Public Health Reserve Corps. Even though Eugene and Springfield are the majority of people in Lane County, the resources are all with us as well. And so if you look at square miles, it's a much different picture. It takes more resources to get to areas outside of Eugene and Springfield, which means that if, for every 100 people we have X amount of dollars, it takes more money to have the same impact, or more hours or more resources to have that same impact outside of Eugene and Springfield. Most of our efforts for the vaccine response for the pandemic, of course, they were in this area. That's where we are. That's where the resources and the infrastructure are. But we also had people out in Florence that wanted to help and were willing to do more. We went out to Bonita, Oak Ridge, Cottage Grove, Mackenzie River. We want to be in every area of Lane County that needs us and wants us to be there.
And more importantly, we want to provide opportunities for volunteers in those communities to feel connected to Eugene and Springfield and feel supported by us so that we can support them, they can support us, and we kind of have these hubs of our public health reserve corps throughout the county and rural and our urban area, I say, as Eugene Springfield, our highly urban area.
And we want our public health corps to be equitable. Rising tides lift all boats, but it doesn't really solve the issue if those disparities stay the same. We want to be volunteer powered. We do not lack for areas of need or opportunities for positive change. We want to identify the expertise and enthusiasm that our members have and work together to figure out how we can direct that, how we can support our members, and use your experience, your history, your skills to build on that enthusiasm and have an impact. There is so many opportunities for training, for skill building, for coordination available to us as a public health reserve corps. We want to absorb your enthusiasm and put that back out there in the community in the ways that we are best able to make that change. These are the areas of interest that you all identified the end of last year. Disaster response, of course, is always going to be high on the list. That is the founding principle of what an MRC is for. Housing, emergency, and services to the unhoused, that's a statistically equal response needed there for enthusiasm for an identified need. Same with weather, climate, and related disasters, but that's more than just the unhoused. That's wildfires, that's drought, that's extreme heat. Obviously, some populations are going to be more affected by that than others. Specific medical services. This was actually a kind of a broad group of suggestions ranging from, of course, helping unhoused people. We were talking about, we had suggestions for setting up mini clinics inside schools for providing some routine care, going out, like Sarah was saying, to encampments, or just to communities that might not have a regular source for what we take for granted every day. And I realized I misspelled community for community support. Look at that. Generic community support. A lot of people just wanted to find what needed help and how they could do it and how they could get to work. We had someone who wanted to get rid of the trash. I'm all set to that. It's fairly a simple plan, but easy to do, right? We want to expand on these areas. We want to get more detailed responses, and we want to inform these responses with data about our county. I am currently working with someone from the epidemiology office to get information about what the actual need is, where's the need, who are the people who have those needs. And that's going to be key in directing support and really providing kind of support that we want to. This top banner has just ruined me. So where we are right now, we are finishing our strategic plan. And it's more than just a mission statement. This is, although it is a broad document, it involves a lot of planning, coordination, identification of resources, and direction, community partners, coordination with different jurisdictions across the county. So we have, right now, we have a pretty solid one. We're filling in some of the details with sustainability plan details about the budget and the fiscal plan. The rest of this stuff, volunteer activation, training, these are things that once we get this strategic plan approved, we're going to come back to you and we're going to get your input. We're going to say, this is what we have. What do you think? What is your vision? How do you think you or everyone can inform the document and expand it out into a more comprehensive plan for the future? So we had a couple questions. Let me pull this up here. How will you work with the city and CERT members? Do you want to have the Immunity Corps go through a CERT training? I touched on this before. We have a lot of people who are already engaged with disaster response or just community support organizations. We want to partner with those organizations to figure out how we can address any gaps in service and then supplement those already existing organizations through coordination. It may be that if you want to go through a CERT training, go through a CERT training. Awesome. We are going to want to be familiar with that organization and how they operate and what their responses are. So we have, I know, a very active member of the Immunity Corps who is in the Eugene CERT. And so she's been very good in kind of informing us about their current structure and their current activities. And then we also have, I have previously completed ICS 100 and 200. Should I repeat? That's something that I'm not sure about. I don't know if it's been 10 years, maybe, you know, that is something that we're going to dial down in because we do want a baseline training level before people become active. And I'm not sure when this person took those courses or what their experience was with it. Wondering if we need to take the final exams on the FEMA courses or only if we want the community education unit or continuing education units, excuse me. And then what is the timeline for completing all 3 courses? We don't have that written in stone yet. We are going to be wanting the community education, continuing education units, excuse me, and we do want you taking those final exams. It's just a benchmark for us to be able to understand where everyone is. You can retake the exam. We want to get you through it. We want you to understand it. It's not about weeding people out. Timeline for completing all 3 courses. We would want you to have that done before you go on any official activations, trainings, meetups, absolutely. We just want you involved. But if we're going to respond in an organized, coordinated manner, we do need to have that set up.
Actually, I'm not sure about that, Evan. We may, I believe that we've been looking towards having 2, if not 3, just be the baseline for applying to be a member of the Public Health Reserve Corps. So that's, again, something that is in progress, but I think it's probably the baseline of what you need to have. It's just a certificate. You can email the FEMA coordinators. I had mine a few years ago and then I couldn't find my certificates. And so I emailed them and they sent them to me within a few minutes. And so you would just forward those to us, your certificates of completion. But we're gonna have yes. So the 3 trainings are basically, we are creating there's the national MRC and then the state, they have some standards of what is the minimum requirements to be a member of an MRC or a Public Health Reserve Corps. And so it is ICS, Incident Command System 100, 200, and 700. And it's very dry, but if you take it and you think about the context of when you were at MassVax or anything that you've volunteered for, and you think about who's in charge, and then how do you make decisions about actions to take and what your mission is, and how you are deciding to how you assign duties, and what your scope of management is. So the idea of like span of control. So there's a lot of really interesting things that are also, I took it before I was actually a volunteer firefighter, and it was everything I could do to stay awake. Now that I've been on fires and I've been in the pandemic and all of these things, I've been retaking them actually, because it's a lot more interesting now that it actually means something. So if we have taken those before, but it has been a while, so they're free. They're on FEMA. You can go to the website and there are more. If you want to further your and take extra classes, there are extra that you can take. So I actually totally recommend refreshing. And you could send your certificates in, but then you could do a refresher course. FEMA offers them for free. So additionally, we'll share more information as we move forward. Basically, there are core competencies that we can build towards. And so let's say that you are a doctor and you are a retired doctor and you really are interested in doing clinical care and you want to focus on first aid or triage or trauma. You would take certain courses, and we have lots of information that we can share once we are an active MRC or Public Health Reserve Corps about how to basically get to a level of competency that you can respond to different things in that area. So there are a lot of resources. One of them is called MRC Train. And we've been a little bit, I have access because I have a Lane County email. Fran said she was able to get in. So there are free classes. Once we are an official Public Health Reserve Corps, everyone who is a member will have access to thousands of free courses. And so you can specialize, you can decide, hey, I want to learn more about this. There is everything you can imagine. One of the things that I really want the entire Corps to train on is Narcan and responding to opioid crisis. So that would be something that is an example of, we would be able to go on MRC Train, take the course, and then we would probably drill and exercise in person. So we have sent out some materials previously, probably on the invite for either this open house or some other things, but we'll continue to send out information about, hey, just so you know, we keep working on getting our official document to be an official Public Health Reserve Corps. So you work on getting those certifications.
So these are kind of our boxes that we have to check off. And you can see that we don't necessarily need to do these in any specific order. We are affiliated with an appropriate local sponsoring housing organization, that is Lane County Public Health. Have an identified leader. I'm not sure if we've identified a leader at this point. I haven't seen that on paper anywhere. Sarah, what do you think?
Have an identified leader for the MRC?
Yeah.
Oh, it's me.
That's all right. There
I
you
got
go.
hired last week. I'm officially the field operations supervisor, and I'm officially in a permanent position. It only took a year. It was the world's longest job interview.
There you are. Establish and maintain partnerships with key local community groups. We have that. We did that in the pandemic. That is set up. We want to expand that. We want to get closer. We want to find the groups and communities that we don't know about yet, that we're not working with yet. Have plans in place. We are building more and more plans. That's going to be, I think, a continuing process, even after we get certified, even after we're up and running. We're not going to stop doing that sort of stuff. Participate in public health preparedness and emergency response activities. That's just being an MRC. That is being the Public Health Reserve Corps.
And that speaks to, I'm watching some of the comments that you might not be able to see, Evan, but so Fran commented about we can interact with Eugene CERT, Eugene Springfield Fire Department. I've been in contact with Search and Rescue and patients as well. And so they already know about us, and we're excited to be able to do some exercises and trainings with them. So it's, again, we totally want to collaborate with everyone that we can in terms of getting our skill sets at levels that we can have wide varying responses, as well as making sure that our volunteer corps isn't also gonna, so the earthquake hits, we want to make sure that every volunteer that we have isn't also a CERT volunteer and isn't also a search and rescue volunteer, because we need to make sure that we have more people than, people who are, and it's wonderful, volunteerism is wonderful, but we're going to have to do some outreach. So we're going to have a mission set. Probably what's really cool is we get to create mission sets, and we say, hey, this is something that's really of interest to me. I'm a volunteer. I want to take the lead. I want to create this mission set. I'm going to recruit volunteers to work on this. I want to go to the nursing school and present a 15-minute, 20-minute presentation about what the Lane County Public Health Reserve Corps is, and invite students to join us. Maybe they could come and train with us. So there's a lot of possibilities. And neighborhood associations, absolutely. I know Washington County, they have done tremendous work preparing for emergent, when the earthquake hits, basically getting neighborhood associations equipped with buckets and shovels so that you can have a pit toilet so that everybody doesn't get malaria and dysentery or whatever. So that, there's a lot of coordination with Whitebird and Occupy Medical. Absolutely. We want to, some of the things that we'll have to figure out and learn and figure out is like, how do we supplement each other's work and support each other without duplicating in ways that aren't helpful, right? So if there is something that is actually already being done and it is serving the community in a complete way, then maybe we would have it tailor ours to be slightly different and fill those gaps that aren't being met. So that means understanding what community partners are doing specifically, and then figuring out what are some of the alternatives. We're going to get to questions in just a minute. We're going to let Evan finish, and then we will have a Q&A session.
I think we're ready for the Q&A session.
Yay! Fran's hand is up first. Would you like to go?
Sure. In terms of being CERT trained, I mean, I think it's good to be both, because if there's an earthquake, before you even get to the spot to participate in the MRC, you got to be able to get out of the neighborhood. And you also, part of CERT is just making sure like your neighbor is stable. And so being CERT trained, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to belong to the CERT Eugene group, but being CERT trained gives you a lot of information that if there's an emergency, you know how to even get to where the incident command center is. And it also you learn a lot of good information, like never get lower than a half a tank of gas in the state of Oregon, because if there's an earthquake, we're going to lose all our gas because it's in Portland on sand. So a lot of things you learn from CERT. So it doesn't mean that that your interest is being taken away. It's just it builds a better foundation. And my comment about Eugene CERT is Patience is with you guys, but she still interacts with Eugene CERT. So she's a good resource to, in terms of interacting with Eugene CERT, and she used to run it. So as I said before, the county's very lucky to have her. Knowles also gives good courses on wilderness first aid that I find, in a situation where you have nothing, like, you have an earthquake, could help you immensely. So those are the resources. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Fran. Any other questions, comments? I actually had someone gave me an opposite example, which is if we do a trauma-informed care training, often first responders, so firefighters, Eugene Springfield, EMTs, they don't get that training. And so they might come to us and do a training with us as well. So in terms of trainings and exercises and knowledge bases and building those skill sets, it's so important to partner with partners and collaborate.
Yvonne asked, if I registered with Servor for giving vaccines, do I still need to sign up with the MRC? And yes, but it's more about us registering as an MRC, and then you'll be able to go into your Servor account and say, I want to be a part of this. So there's not much more that you individually will have to do. All of that's on our end for the most part.
Except for the basic trainings that
Yes.
are going to be required, to the ICS classes that will be required. That's the wonderful thing about Servor. And that's what's really unfortunate, is that once we're not in an emergency activation, Lane County can no longer use Servor volunteers unless we are an active MRC, which is why we're working really hard at getting activated, because we don't want to lose that access.
One of the things that we want for those who are interested, who are excited about this, is to just think in the next couple of weeks, what sort of needs do you know about? Are you're familiar with? What sort of activation ideas you come up with? We have a lot that we would like to be doing. A lot of trainings, a lot of community building, but we also want you guys to be directing a good part of that. We want to work on what everyone is enthusiastic about helping with. So we're going to want a lot of feedback about goals, directions, expertise, that sort of stuff.
If I
I'm
can
reading the
add,
question. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to add, in addition to what people have as skills, what they may have for resources that you may need in a disaster, that's something I think also is nice to know. Like in my neighborhood, we know who has what. So if there's a disaster, we kind of can group together in, who has a truck, who has a chainsaw, that type of thing. So it's because, at the incident command center, people have to be able to get there. And if there's an earthquake, it might be tough.
The good news is there's a lot of wonderful work that's already been. There are systems in place. I was actually just reading some documents that have been in place. So the city and the county and the hospitals and public health and human services have plans in place for every type of disaster and emergency, and how you activate and which resources come and how you finance it and all of these things. And so what's good is, as an MRC, we'll get to be an added resource. We don't have to invent all of that. That does exist. Some of the things that I am looking at are what are our equipment that we have in terms of being able to, if we had a disaster and there was overflow at the hospitals, we have some tents, but I'm looking at maybe we can buy some newer tents that are easier to put up, so that we could actually set up field hospitals with Public Health Reserve Corps medical volunteers and non-medical volunteers, because we would need, as we've seen in mass vax, we have needed more non-medical volunteers than medical volunteers. And that's always important to remember, because you need so many people doing other non-medical and non-clinical things. So what it is it's called a mission set, and you create a mission set, and that becomes like a focus of your, it's an activation, it's a focus. And so one of the really neat ones that I've seen, they did it in Massachusetts, and I think some other states. And it was a resiliency, pandemic resilience for older adults mission set. And so it paired public health MRC members, volunteers, with older adults who were completely isolated during the pandemic. And some of them had memory issues, so it might be a short meeting, but they met with them even virtually, or gave them a phone call, or met through a window, and had, basically it was interaction with people who were completely isolated and completely on their own during the beginning of the pandemic, and the first year and a year and a half. And so I don't know, I really found that, as someone who had a grandmother who was in assisted living and died during the pandemic, that was very moving for me. I really liked that mission set, and I like the thought of being able to find more things that we can do. Let's see. Neurologist. Okay. I was Yeah, I will say, like, over and over again, if I could create the systems in the way that I want, they would be different than the ways that our policies and procedures and county guidelines and state guidelines say that they must. I understand that there's a lot of bureaucracy that's needed and laws that are needed to protect us and to protect the community. It also often feels like we're having to operate with our hands behind our back. I cannot tell you how many iterations of trying to get clinical people to be able to vaccinate, and the having to stand on our heads and figure out licensing and the ways that we've had to do it. And many of those people are here on this meeting today, and we would never have been able to vaccinate as many people as we did without those volunteers. And it has been very challenging. We do believe that once we are an official MRC, it will be easier. I've been learning more about emeritus licenses. We basically haven't been able to use retirees with emeritus licenses, MDs, as med leads unless they're county employees, because of the protections that they needed to have as county employees. So once we're an MRC, that may be different, an official MRC. So we believe that part of seeing how it's different is going to be figuring out what it is that what we want our focus to be. I do believe that it's different in the way of, I'm hoping that we can do some career development for younger people, see this as an opportunity to do outreach into young people who are considering perhaps going to med school, nursing school, EMT school, going into mental health services, kind of connecting, giving opportunities for young people to shadow, to participate, to be a part of an organization that is serving the community and gives them some models of what they might be interested in doing professionally. CERT is more limited in what they're able to do response-wise, and you could probably speak to other volunteers who are CERT members, but MRCs are able to be, once you have the proper trainings in place and you have the liability in place, and based on your volunteer core and skill sets, what it is that the ways that we're able to respond are going to be, it'll be bigger, actually. So for example, with CERT, the liability so CERT basically can't respond locally. They can respond in Florence because of the liability ramifications of them responding locally, because of, however, I'm not sure exactly what the bureaucracy behind it is. It has to do with liability protections and being a county that's self-insured, or through the city. I think it's through the city. I don't know why, but it has to do with bureaucracy, and the way that locally we'll be able to respond will be throughout the whole county as a public health reserve corps.
And then we're also going to be responding to much more than just emergencies. The goal is to be active, to be involved, to be a constant presence in communities that we are living, working in, helping with. We want to be a public health corps, not really an emergency response corps. We will respond to emergencies, we will respond to disasters, but we want to be helping with the chronic, ongoing needs that we all know are present in Lane County.
And we're not trying to take over anybody else's work that's working really well. We want to supplement. We want to fill gaps that aren't being filled, that where the need is. Our next steps are, this is an informational session. We kind of wanted to let you know what's in the works. We wanted to let you know what we're working towards, and that we hope to have a real live public health reserve corps in the next 6 months. That would mean that then we wanted to give you all the opportunity to do some of the trainings that will be requirements to join an MRC or a public health reserve corps. The acronym PHRC. We need a better acronym, but I do like Public Health Reserve Corps because it's broad and it includes non-clinical and non-medical volunteers, but it's hard to, like, MRC just rolls off the tongue really quick, really easily. So we are in process of finalizing our strategic plan. We will get authorization and approval from Public Health, from Health and Human Services. We'll run it by the Board of Commissioners. We will have to make sure that our liability and workers' comp protections are in place before we can activate. And then we will submit the strategic plan to the state, and then they will hopefully approve it. And then we'll move forward with beginning our Public Health Reserve Corps. Any other questions, comments?
I will be sending out a brief questionnaire asking about people's thoughts. If you have any more questions, what you would like to know more about, what you would like to see as activities. Do you think that we're missing something that we should have included here? I'll send out those out, and please feel free to write as much as you would like or as little as you would like. We just kind of want to hear your thoughts. And yes, we will be sending out the training links, and we don't have a specific timeline right now. As Sarah was saying, we're about 6 months or so for getting everything up and running. You can do
maybe
the training
sooner. We just don't know.
Yeah.
It requires enough approvals that we just don't know. Plus, everything is slow right now because we are still in COVID times, even though it doesn't seem like it. So just government agencies are so busy with COVID needs that everything seems to take longer than we thought it would.
And there are training links on the email I sent out about this Zoom. I will include those in the email I send out after this. I'll probably send that out tomorrow.
And they're also in the chat here. And yes, we're all very happy to send you the links anytime. And you've got, hopefully, did you have one more slide with our contact information, Evan?
I did not, no.
Okay, well, we'll add it to the chat here, but I think all of you have our emails, so you can email us, and we'll just keep you posted. We really appreciate everyone who has volunteered. We appreciate your interest. We appreciate you being here. We're really excited to get to know you more and to work towards building and starting a Public Health Reserve Corps. It's going to be pretty fantastic, and I'm really excited.
I was very excited about you all seeing the lower half of my face. I apologize, my camera isn't working. I got my beard trimmed and everything. I gotta say, I am disappointed.
Oh, Evan. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.